70%. Just let that number sink in for a second, would you? In the business world, we spend literally countless hours locked in boardrooms dreaming up these brilliant, game-changing strategies. But the shocking reality? 70% of those strategies completely fail when it's time to actually implement them. No way, right? But it's true. Why? Because strategy formulation without execution, well, it's really just a dream. It's a complete illusion.
Welcome to this explainer. I'm so thrilled you're here with us because today we are tackling one of the absolute highest stakes topics in the entire business world: strategy implementation. We're going to figure out exactly how to build the organizational machine you need to take those brilliant boardroom ideas and turn them into actual boots-on-the-ground action. All right, let's dive right into this.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the implementation gap, then we'll examine blueprints for success, walk right through the 7-step process, look at the strategic leader, and finally, bring the whole shebang together with the 3 pillars.
Let's kick things off with part 1, the implementation gap, or as I kind of like to call it, where good ideas go to die.
To really wrap our heads around this gap, we need a clear definition. Strategy implementation is simply the process of putting a chosen strategy into action. It's the literal translation of a grand, sweeping strategy into specific plans, daily tasks, and on-the-ground activities. Look, this isn't just about blasting out a company-wide email saying, hey, here's the new plan. It's a highly action-oriented process. It demands massive resource allocation and a fierce, unwavering commitment from literally every single employee across all levels of management.
You can really see the stark contrast here between the two sides of the coin. Think about strategy formulation. It's a very intellectual process. It answers what to do, and it's almost always handled by top management sitting in a quiet, comfortable room. But implementation? That is a messy, operational reality. It's all about how to do it, and it drags absolutely everyone in the organization into the mix. That high failure rate we talked about? It happens precisely because making that jump from a neat, intellectual dream to a chaotic, operational reality is just incredibly difficult.
Okay, moving on to part 2, blueprints for success. We're talking about organizational structures.
So, the most basic blueprint you'll see is the simple structure. This is where the owner-manager basically controls everything. It's perfect for small, brand-new businesses since it's super easy to manage. But, as you can imagine, it struggles immensely the second the firm starts to grow. That is exactly where the functional structure steps in. This divides the company into highly specialized departments. Finance, HR, marketing, operations. It's extremely efficient for medium to large firms that need specialized skills. Apple is actually a fantastic real-world example of this. But a quick word of warning here. While it does create a very clear chain of command, it can also dangerously slow down decision-making. You end up creating these isolated functional silos where departments just don't talk to each other.
So, what exactly happens when a company gets even bigger and maybe heavily diversified? You're going to need much more complex blueprints. Enter the multi-divisional or M-form structure and the strategic business unit or SBU structure. In an M-form, separate divisions operate semi-independently with their own functions, reporting right up to headquarters. But for those massively complex firms, the SBU structure groups related divisions under a single SBU head. Why does this matter? Well, the crucial takeaway here is that by filtering reports through an SBU head, you drastically reduce the CEO's span of control and you vastly improve coordination among those related businesses. It's a real game changer.
We also have a few other genuinely fascinating structural designs to look at. Take the holding company structure. This is where a parent company controls legally independent subsidiaries just by holding their shares. A great example? The Tata Group. They grant a ton of autonomy to their various companies. Then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you've got project-based structures. These are just temporary teams formed for a specific job, and the moment it's done, they dissolve. Poof. Finally, there's the team-based structure. This one relies heavily on cross-functional teams and a super flat hierarchy. It offers extreme agility and shared decision-making. If you're in a fast-paced environment like a startup or a consulting firm, this structure is an absolute powerhouse for innovation.
All right, so we've built the vehicle. Let's move to part 3, the 7-step process. This is your execution engine.
In theory, this process looks like a beautifully clean, logical sequence. First up, you set your annual objectives, taking those massive long-term goals and breaking them down into bite-sized yearly milestones. Second, you formulate policies to guide your day-to-day operations. Third, you allocate your budget and your resources. Fourth, you develop or tweak that organizational structure we just talked about. Fifth, you actively manage resistance. You do this by actually talking with your people and addressing their fears about the change. And finally, you align the organizational culture to make sure its values fully support the new direction.
I mean, it looks pretty perfect on paper, doesn't it?
Well, time for a reality check. The process is absolutely not linear. Business is a messy, dynamic, chaotic reality. You don't just, check off step 3 and never look back. It's a highly iterative process. Let's say you reach step 3 and suddenly realize your allocated resources are running completely dry. Guess what? You have to loop all the way back to step 1 and revise your objectives. You're going to constantly bounce back and forth between these steps. It requires nonstop monitoring and adjustment just to keep the strategy alive.
And navigating that messy reality brings us perfectly to Section 4, the strategic leader, the critical human element. To actually lead a complex implementation effort, you need strategic leadership. Now, we define this as the ability to anticipate, envision, maintain flexibility, think strategically, and initiate the changes needed to create a competitive future. Notice what's missing there. It's not just about being a boss sitting in a corner office handing down orders. This is about being an active, flexible driver who actually navigates the organization through all that uncertainty, steering it toward a competitive future. To pull that off, the strategic leader has 6 core responsibilities. First, they have to set a crystal clear vision and actually communicate it to everyone. Second, they must develop their human capital, meaning training and mentoring their people. Third, they've got to build and sustain a culture that genuinely supports execution. Fourth, they need to smartly manage the portfolio, carefully allocating resources across different business units. Fifth, and this is absolutely crucial, they must ensure all decisions and actions remain legally and ethically sound. And lastly, they're responsible for building core competencies and dynamic capabilities for the future. As you can see, it is a massive, multifaceted balancing act.
Which brings us to the climax of our explainer. Section 5, the 3 pillars, your framework for survival.
Listen, if you want the ultimate cheat sheet for strategy implementation, this is it right here. Successful execution rests on 3 vital pillars. First up is structure. This is your vehicle. It clearly defines roles, responsibilities, and how you coordinate. Second is resources. This is your fuel. And hey, it's not just about money. It's about having the right people, the physical equipment, the data, and the actual time required to get it all done. Third is management systems. Think of this as your dashboard. It includes your planning, your control systems like KPIs, and your reward systems to incentivize the exact right behaviors, all of it wrapped up in a highly supportive culture. Here's the catch, though. If any one of these 3 pillars is weak, the entire strategy collapses, period.
And that brings us right back to where we started today. We now know that formulation, well, that's the easy part. And we know that 70% of strategies fail the second they hit the real world. But now, you've got the blueprints. You know about the messy, iterative process, and you understand the 3 pillars required to build a true execution machine. So take a hard look at your own organization and ask yourself, are you actually building the machinery required to make it a reality, or is your strategy just a dream?